Right.
Yeah. So, right, we're looking at these two bad boys, NOx, which is oxides of nitrogen.
That's right.
Which you know is causing a lot of harm and effect to the environment. And DPM, which is diesel particulate matter. And actually, those two are bad. They actually kind of work contrary to each other. Because, you know, whenever you're having efficient combustion, right, your tailpipe is spewing a lot of NOx, right? If you want to lower your NOx, which you can by lowering your temperature, then what's going to happen is that you're going to create more DPM and vice versa. So, you know, you got to find a happy medium here. But so these are what we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk about the three-headed monster, the EPA.
Okay.
Okay, next.
One question, Chito. What's the DPM again?
Diesel particulate matter.
The particulate matter is, in a nutshell, it's the soot that comes out, the black stuff you see come out the exhaust pipes.
Yeah.
It's in a nutshell, it's hydrocarbons. It's unburned fuel.
Okay. And that's what burns off into the atmosphere?
What you see coming out is a whole bunch of particulate matter, because it's measured in microns, which is 4/100,000ths of an inch, which is smaller than the human hair. You can't even see it.
Yeah, right.
But you got so much coming out, and it's just a big mass of it. That's why I see the black smoke. Sometimes when it gets real bad, it's actually flakes.
Okay.
And you can fire up a truck in a shop maybe after, like, we got that turbo failure coming in Monday.
Yeah.
If it sits too long, we fire it and change it and fire it up, we could get black soot come out, which then it floats down. It's the hydrocarbons that are unburnt that are sitting in the exhaust system. It floats down.
Oh,
It's
so
like,
that kind of lingers?
no, it floats down like snowflakes.
Wow.
And then when you go to wipe it off, it just smears. It's kind of like taking charcoal and rub it on your hands. It smears like charcoal.
Okay.
Because charcoal is made from carbon also.
Yes.
And that's what the particulate matter is bad for your respiratory system.
Okay.
The NOx is bad for the air in the sky.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
the NOx, the nitrogen oxides. Remember, you got nitrogen going into your combustion chamber because it's in the ambient air.
Yeah.
But then when it hits with the heat in the combustion chamber, along with some oxygen there, it turns into an oxide. So then you got the nitrogen oxide, which he's going to explain how we can, I don't want to say eliminate, but reduce it, right?
Exactly. Okay. So the next slide will kind of show you a little bit more about the history. And like Mr. Pontzer was saying, well, there you are. Yeah, I had to put that in there for you.
Yeah.
That's
I usually do the backstroke. That's fine. Doing the breaststroke.
Okay, next. And now we're looking at the three-headed monster. Next. Okay, so
But back it up a second.
Why did you call it three-headed monster?
I don't know, because it sounds because it's EPA.
Who is actually worse than the EPA?
The CARB. CARB.
Oh, you got him there. Okay.
Yeah, actually, you know,
That's what all originated.
yes, I know you're going to bring that up because, believe it or not, even though that's California Air Resource Board, they preceded the EPA. So they set the regulations prior to EPA did, and therefore all the truck manufacturers have also to get their stamp of approval before they manufacture trucks. So I had to put that in there.
That's where you had all the tree huggers, the hippies and stuff from the 60s and the early 70s.
That's where you're from, right?
What?
California.
No, I'm from Virginia.
Well, you always like to go there.
I lived out there for 20 years. It's a nice place to visit now, but you don't want to live there.
You definitely don't want to drive a truck there.
Virginia
Like,
expensive.
I grew up in Vienna.
Oh, yeah, just like why can't you go back?
That's a deliver all around
It's
there.
better out there than here. Better than.
Well, I live right across the river. I live over by Potomac.
Oh, it's right around there.
yeah, I probably couldn't drive my truck there to California as we are today. Next. But so what are we looking at? You know, prior to 1970, none of this mattered because trucks were spewing out about 16 grams of nitrogen oxide per brake horsepower. Next. And you see what we did with the Clean Air Act is 1990, President Bush, the father, signed the Clean Air Act. And that's when it got the EPA into motion next.
You mentioned the Clean Air Act. Back up a second. I told you guys about air conditioning, certification for air conditioning. That all came about because of this Clean Air Act you're
Oh,
talking
okay.
about.
Oh, wow.
The
Things that
chlorofluorocarbons in the air
Yeah.
and CFCs,
Yeah.
that came about with this. That was all part of that Clean Air Act,
Wow.
along with this stuff here.
Okay, so that really plays.
Yeah,
the-
and
yeah.
it does. You can
Yeah.
look at your
Next.
timeline that he's got down here. His timeline. Back here, all this stuff was dealing with cars right here. Trucks didn't start coming around till he's got later in.
Exactly. So that's, right, and that's when the EPA got into motion and they said, okay, 2007 was one of the first mandates where they'll go ahead next, set the emissions about 1.2 grams, okay, per BHP. With the goal of 2010, that was a big year, setting it at 0.2 grams per brake horsepower. Now we came all the way from, next please. There you go. From about 1.6 grams, all the way down to 0.2. That's a big decrease. So a lot of things have happened. And so as I mentioned, 2010, that was a key year. So who was compliant? Next. We'll see that just about everybody, next, all the truck manufacturers that you can think of, including Detroit,
And what year was this?
2010.
Okay.
And that was the basis. Next. And pretty much what we were doing is making the transformation of the NOx into water and nitrogen, which is natural. Okay?
Who's missing there?
Hydrogen.
Caterpillar. Yeah.
Caterpillar.
2010, they stopped doing the trucks.
Well, that ties into
Because of
my
this.
presentation. Oh yeah, exactly.
Because
Caterpillar.
of this.
Well, that's good that you mentioned that because really the only culprit that was not compliant was Navstar International. Because what essentially their thinking was, okay, we want to take care of the trucker because realizing that all the other manufacturers were looking at SCR, right, Selective Catalytic Remover,
Right.
meaning that you would have to put DEF, right? They figured that, well, they thought that DEF was toxic, which it isn't, but also they didn't want the burden to be on the trucker to have to stop and get that. They came out with this Advanced EGR. Where they use gas recirculation to reduce the NOx. However, it didn't work. As you know, there were pretty much 2 years next where they weren't in compliant and they got fined by the EPA like something like $9 million. The only reason why they were able to get these trucks out was because they actually had credits for the EPA, but they still got fined. And then on top of that, all these fleets, we're looking at several thousand of these trucks in those years that were using the Advanced EGR that we knew didn't work, didn't meet the emissions requirements. And so a lot of these fleets were contracting the leases. Now, you may ask, well, what does that have to do with the engines? The Maxxforce engines they use was actually good. They're solid engines. The problem is with the Advanced EGR that they were using in terms of the design. Under the hood, the EGR, the cooler EGR valve would tend to come loose, vibration, wind, whatnot, and the result fail. With the EGR cooler, a lot of the coolant was leaking back into the combustion chamber. With the EGR technology, a lot of the emissions was going back in the combustion chamber, causing more soot, more breakdown, and therefore the trucks were breaking down. So good engine, but bad emission technology caused the engine to fail. And that's why I got a good deal with my truck. Yeah.
You are trying to defend your truck.
Yeah.
But your truck is a good.
Oh, yes.
A lot of people don't like the Maxxforce engine because it's nothing that's not gonna last.
Except mine,
Yeah. You mentioned the credits.
yes,
Do you know how those worked?
not really.
As the emissions evolved, the manufacturers were getting credits from the EPA. They had certain bar heights they had to hit, certain goals they had to hit. And if they hit them, they got credits. If they didn't, they got just like plus and minus. So International built up some credits because International really came about in 2007. They were a little bit ahead of everybody on going to the diesel particulate filter. So they got some credits and stuff there, but then because everybody else was changing for the 2010 standards he was talking about, everybody else is getting the credits because they were complying with the standards.
And they still work.
International is going a different way, so that's where they were falling below the standards. But they had built up so many credits in the meantime, so they didn't have to actually pay. But then they got to a certain point where they ran out of credits. And that's when in 2010, because Caterpillar basically said, you know, we're getting out of trucking business. It hadn't gotten to off-road stuff yet. That's what Caterpillar is known for, is the off-road stuff. That's when Caterpillar and Navistar got in bed together. And Caterpillar had all kinds of credits. So that helped Navistar. And they started building a truck that looked very similar to an International, but said Caterpillar in front of it. International, they were in bed together with each other. And then they're kind of using the best of both of them to build some on-highway trucks. They're also building off-road trucks.
Okay.
But that's how all this come about. And you mentioned the credits, because EPA used to give the credits because of the emissions.
Okay, so what's next? Okay, back to the big picture now. You got some perspective on the history of the EPA and the regulations. So the first thing we want to talk about is the EGR, which came out about 2002, right? Shortly after the Clean Air Act. And this is, back then, all manufacturers could just use the basic EGR, and that worked. But as the standards improved, 2010, you couldn't use the EGR anymore. And essentially what EGR does, it's the exhaust gas recirculation, where you're taking some of the exhaust gas that's coming out after the combustion chamber, and you're recirculating it back into the combustion chamber. It's pretty simple technology. It works because you're going to change your ratio, your air to fuel ratio, and therefore less NOx gets released out. Exactly. Okay, next. And essentially, this is it. You see, you know, in red, the exhaust gas coming out and getting sent back via the EGR valve. And the EGR valve will determine whether it's 30 to 50% of the exhaust gas coming back in.
So that varies the ratio?
Say again?
That varies the ratio?
Exactly. It's going to determine that. And essentially, the technology worked. Now, remember what I said earlier about NOx and DPM? They kind of work counter to each other. So you're going to reduce NOx this way using the EGR, but then you're going to have a lot of soot because you're not burning all the fuel. So it's not, you're actually making your combustion less efficient by reducing NOx, which means that you're going to lower your fuel mileage. So it's a trade-off. So if you see the next slide, because of all the exhaust gas, you can see that we need an EGR cooler in there to cool the exhaust gas before it goes in. And reducing the temperature also reduces the amount of NOx getting spewed out. Next. And here's another bird's eye view of the parts we're looking at, the valve, the cooler. Both the valve and the cooler on the Navistar tended to fail, and that caused a lot of back problems with the Maxxforce engines. Next. And this is an international engine. The EGR valve is located near the oil filter.
Is that the engine?
No, it's not.
From your truck?
No, my truck is cleaner than that. This is, looks similar.
That's what he does out there every day, pops it in, polish it a little bit, section it. It's real clean now.
Yeah, I should spend that time studying for my quiz, right? So, okay, so back to the big picture. Now, we talked about the EGR, right? That came out 2002. Now, we know that the next technology was the DPF, which is the diesel particulate filter. And let's take a look at that. Yeah. And essentially, it looks like a muffler. You guys have seen it, right?
Right.
And it just filters all the soot. This is a problem, especially with those 3 years of Navstar. Next slide. And it works really well. It filters the soot up to 1 micron. But the problem also is that it builds up. And when it builds up, you have to clean it. And it's a process what we call regeneration. It could be both passive and active. It does it pretty well. I know for a fact with my truck, those internationals, sometimes you have to do a forced regeneration, which means that you can't do it on the road. You have to pull over, park, and go through this process where the engine actually sends fuel, sends a spark, and it takes about at least 30 minutes.
And you'd have to do that every couple of miles?
No,
You should probably do it more often than that. Depends on how you run the truck. Like our truck's down, like you said, it's designed to happen as you go down the road a little bit. But if it messes up or you lug the engine too much, or like these guys down here at the range, they're always going slow, so they really don't get it working hard enough.
Right.
You've got to force it, in which case you have a button in your truck,
Yes.
but you have to park it. But if you don't do it on a regular basis, you drive down the road, and as you said, you have to pull over on the side of the road, it derates the engine to where you have no power. So the only thing you can do is pull over and actually force it to regen.
And how long do you have to sit idle, forcing it to?
You just sit there and twiddle your thumbs, go in and eat dinner or whatever. It takes about 30 minutes. That's the problem we have with the blue truck out here.
Waste of time.
It wouldn't regen. I mean, you couldn't force it either. We couldn't even force it hooking a computer program to it. The harnesses are all messed up.
Crazy.
So that's a trying to fix it.
Yeah, that's a waste of time.
It's very loud and it gets very hot. I mean, I don't know how hot, but
It gets exceptionally hot. It's hotter than normal because it's
Since it's burning off.
you see the picture he's got there, like the honeycomb?
Yeah.
The filter looks like that, but it's really, really small. Because you mentioned microns. Microns, that
Have to go
stuff's
through
going through there.
there. Yeah.
So you burn that off, it basically kind of cleans it out. But then after a while, and even if you do it on a regular basis, you have to take these out of the truck and clean them every so many years. I'd say
That's
every
too
three,
much.
maybe 400,000 miles. We've had to do it a couple hours down there, and probably have one coming up in the next couple of
Like
months.
it's bad enough that you'd have to already pull over to the side every often
Well,
or so.
yeah, but see, example, Chito's truck. He could go, okay, I probably should maybe once a week or every 2 weeks, set a half hour aside and just do a forced regen while you're not doing something to make sure that it's clean. It's more like, it's kind of like a preventative maintenance type thing. You'd rather do it, because he can do it at any time. He can go out there and do it every day if he wanted to.
Cause you have the time to. But for the companies that, have deadlines and need to get things done, don't got time for that.
Yeah, but in reality, it takes a driver about 30 to 45 minutes, about 30 minutes should take to do a pre-trip inspection. He could do the initial stuff with the engine stuff and then start the truck up and do the regen while he finishes checking everything else out, does his paperwork, or maybe sitting waiting for a load or something. Like you said, you can't move the truck.
Right.
It's set there. It doesn't do it in idle. It raises it up to somewhere between 12 and 1,500 RPMs.
Okay.
You see our trucks out here once in a while. We do them out here with the trucks.
Yeah.
Hey, cause you were doing it a couple of weeks ago, right? It was the blue truck that was sitting out front. Was it the blue truck? Yeah.
Yeah, here's a story a couple years ago. You know, I used to drive trucks, right, for a short period of time. Yeah, so I was driving for CT and I was in DC and I was close to my house, you know. But hey, I had to do a force regen. So it was a bad timing, had to go through all that. And then next thing I know, I got these angry homeowners knocking on my door saying, hey, you know, DC law says you can't idle for more than 5 minutes. I said, sir, I'm not idling. I'm doing a force regen. And I can't move my truck.
Right.
And then he called the police, so.
You serious?
And yeah, it was, but by the time the police came, it was over and then we got going. But it's a big pain in the butt.
Wow.
So.
Because he couldn't move at all. Because we're
Well,
going
could they
for force
have-
regen, it's basically, it doesn't shut the truck down, but you can't do anything, it takes all the power away.
Right.
So you can't do nothing. And that's why you need to do it on a regular thing, so it doesn't mess up.
Yeah, don't wait until it tells you, because when it tells you, you have no choice, and that's an example of the filter.
So that's what you have to do with
Yeah.
your truck
Next.
all the time?
Well,
That's a-
when I drove, I haven't driven this truck except in the parking lot, so
Where's this film?
I've yet to be able to do it. That's the,
Where is it located?
But this?
Yes.
You talking about that particular filter?
Yeah.
yeah, it's the big muffler, right in the tailpipe, right before the end of the tailpipe, you see it. You remember that picture that I showed a couple slides earlier? Yeah, okay, thanks.
That's what the inside of it looks like. And
You
that's-
talking about the exhaust that was sitting right under the truck? That,
Yes.
yeah.
It's actually in sections. They call it exhaust gas after treatment. You've got the diesel particulate filter, your catalytic converter, because that's required on trucks now, and your muffler. So they're in sections.
Okay.
One comes before the next one, before the next one, so forth. They're all clamped together.
Chain reaction thing you got going.
Okay, so the third thing I want to talk about next would be, in order for all this to work, all the other manufacturers next, to make the 2010 emissions, they came up with the SER, right? Selective Catalytic Reduction. What International at first said they wouldn't do. Here is a little bit different because we use DEF, and injected DEF in on the other side of the DPF, which DEF is comprised of deionized water and urea, right? Which is ammonia. Next, and when it gets injected, next, there's an example of DEF, and typically it's blue and it's located near the diesel fuel intake. Next.
I call that universal piss.
Notice the color of the cap.
Green.
Blue.
Typically they're blue. See that one? He's got circled. It says diesel on it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. The blue one will say DEF on it, which is diesel exhaust fluid. It's not really smart to have them next to each other like that, because but in cars, and that's off a car. That's not off a truck.
Right.
These diesel cars out. Put it that close to each other. Well, let's put the diesel in there.
Yeah, you
Or the
wanna do
DEF
that
in there, and they pour it into the fuel tank. Because, like you said, it's made of ionized water.
Right.
That water will plug your fuel filter, then you're not going anywhere.
Right, and that's in the dash. That's actually the alert that you get when you're low on DEF.
Okay.
And just like with the force regen, if you blow it off, right, and don't put DEF, you'll come to a stall.
You said it was stall?
Yes, right. Eventually, you're going to slow down eventually to the point that you can't move anymore, or move very slowly. So you, as a trucker, you can't blow that off.
Yeah, it's a warning light. Remember, you talked in the first quarter with the let go, you had two engine warning lights,
Yeah.
the yellow and the red one.
Yeah.
One's the check engine, one's the stop engine.
Right.
That's the check engine for the regen system.
And how much time do you have as soon as this icon?
They'll give you plenty of time.
It gives you plenty of
Yeah.
time.
It's not like instant,
Okay.
but you don't want to say like comes on today, you want to get taken care of sometime today, you don't want to blow it off. Yeah, I'll wait till the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, nowadays there's DEF everywhere, so whenever you get fuel, you should be able to get it. If not, you can buy the bottles.
There's
Ever
actually,
since I know, cause I didn't know what it was at first, but yeah, I do notice that sometimes I've seen it in 7-Elevens.
yeah, and you see it at parts stores, you see it more and more around. But this is the symbol telling you, there's an issue with your system, whether you need to regen it, it could possibly be low. They actually have a gauge in there, like a fuel gauge, there's one for your DEF. Sometimes it's right underneath your fuel gauge, might be just a bar or something. If you run out of it, shuts the engine down.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're gonna know, I mean, it's got like yellow and red lights, so, unless you're like colorblind or an idiot.
And there you see the DEF tank, it comes in right after the DPF into the SCR catalyst. And pretty much, this is chemistry, right? You're taking ammonia plus NOx and converting that to water and nitrogen, which is natural and safe in the environment. And, you know, it's proven to work. All the manufacturers, including international, now uses the SCR
Yeah.
to meet the.
So that's the universal standard?
What?
You just said the SCR.
It-
What they're using now.
In 2010 is what came about. And it's what all the manufacturers, like you said, except for international, they didn't want to get on board. They're getting on board with it now.
Now.
Yeah. It's- Because laws have changed again in 2018.
How often do the laws change?
Every time I have a new president, no, just.
Laws really didn't come about until, like Chito said, 2006. 2004, just a little bit, because we saw, we can foresee that in 2007, because of the Clean Air Act and everything, it was gonna start changing. That's the first regulation we ever had on diesel. Emission laws started back at the California Air Resource Board back in the 70s.
Okay.
And for years and years, you had two types of engine, whether it's gas or diesel, two types of engine. One was a California engine, one was a 49 state engine. Now, EGR has been around in cars since the 70s. It was actually in trucks in California in the late 70s. Caterpillar and a couple others had EGR systems on. They were junk. They did, like you said, rob the engine of power. And they've come a long way. He's got on here where after it mixes and stuff, the SCR catalyst, it comes out nitrogen. That's our ultimate goal, is for it to come out nitrogen. Chance of it coming out just nitrogen and water, very slim. You're still gonna have some nitrogen oxide in there, but it's reduced it immensely. But, as you know, like with this blue one out there, and that's the problem, guys, with the SCR system, there's a lot of other shit that comes with it. Computers, wiring harnesses, and more shit to screw up.
Wow.
And that's another snapshot.
See, now when we messing with that blue
Okay.
truck out there.
So then it gets to the
Yeah.
point that you can't even just diagnose it just straight off of just hooking it up to the computer. Because other things could have possibly.
Even hooking it up to the computer is stuff that you can have traditional troubleshooting where, okay, it's the simple stuff, but then you hook up the computer, now you gotta ohm all the lines out and stuff like we were doing that to determine, is this particular one, this little water oil gets in that harness, it shorts the whole harness out. You gotta buy a harness. Harness, the one harness just got in yesterday, that one particular harness is $1,000, just for the harness. And we've already put a harness in a module. So there's a couple $1,000s already in the system. Let's see if he's got a picture here, I'll tell you something else.
Well, the next slide shows you the pros and, okay, I was supposed to show the pros and cons, but okay.
I didn't see the pros and cons, let me see it, I didn't see it.
It's probably hidden, that's fine. But I think we kind of went over it, but what I wanted to do next was segue into the gliders, if you want to, but.
Let me see if we get here, glider. I actually had, what the hell? I was going backwards, stop doing that.
Okay,
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm done with you, stop. I have a student that bought a glider from them a couple years ago.
Oh, no way.
About a year ago, yeah.
oh, wow.
Nice Peterbilt.
Yeah, they're amazing trucks, because from the outside, it's brand new, brand spanking new truck. The only thing you're getting older is the engine and transmission. So, well, here's the thing with the 2010, right?
They have a
0.2 grams, right? But see, there's a loophole. What is the loophole? Loophole is either the engine. So, smart people said, okay, why don't we just get an engine, remanufactured engine that was built before 2010. Therefore, we don't have to comply with the new emissions. And that's exactly what they did. So they got the best of both worlds. It's cheaper than getting a new engine. They don't have to worry about the emission standards, and therefore breaking down and stuff like that.
There's recently a big lawsuit with the EPA and Fitzgerald and a couple others. The EPA was trying to eliminate these people from the glider kits because of this. That's actually a 2017 truck with a 2009 or 2010 engine in it. Prior to now it's still got diesel particulate filter on it,
Right.
but doesn't have the selective catalytic reduction on it. So if you test these trucks actually burn cleaner than the ones with SCR, because they're doing some modifications to the engine. And they are, like you said, they're factory rebuilt engine, factory rebuilt transmission, and the trucks, I mean, you look at all those Peterbilts and Kenworths.
Great.
And actually there's Freightliners in the back, that green one's a
Hey,
Freightliner, some
Internationals.
Freightliners. You can get whatever truck. These are all built in Kentucky or Tennessee, one of those two states.
Louisville, right? Louisville, Kentucky.
It might
yeah.
be Kentucky,
Yeah.
it is Louisville, you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Who's the senator from Kentucky?
But you can buy a brand new Peterbilt, it's gonna cost you really fully loaded, about 200 grand.
You said 200 grand?
Yeah,
Wow.
you can buy a fucking house for that, huh?
Yeah, you got that kind of.
And this guy bought, this student bought one, and I think he paid about 125.
Wow.
And it was tricked out. I mean, it was nice. I mean, nice stacks on it. I mean,
The
foam
TV inside
everywhere.
of it and everything?
Huh?
Comes with the TV inside of it?
No, it has an outlet to plug it in.
Okay.
Yeah, that's nice.
You might get something to come with the refrigerator.
NFL package,
Yeah.
right?
But they, all the extra chrome and stuff like that. And a glider kit is, in reality, all it is the steer axle, the hood, and the cab, and the frame rails. You have to supply the engine, the transmission, the rear differentials, the rear axles. So you have to supply that. And these used to be real big, and you used to be able to buy them right from the manufacturer. You go out, let's say, well, it doesn't happen. Chito goes out, totals his truck. Now the truck was running when it totaled, right?
Mhm.
She's like, oh, this sucks. Truck was running, there's nothing wrong with the engine, nothing wrong with the transmission, the rear end, right?
Right.
Yeah, the hood and the cab are fucked up. Okay,
Just replace it.
why not just buy a glider kit, pull the engine, transmission,
And put it in there.
and put it in the other one? That easy. We used to do it all the time when I worked at Kenworth. Guys would wreck their trucks and we do it. Okay? You take the engine out of that and put it in a glider kit, and it doesn't meet the emission laws like he said.
And how much would that roughly cost just to add that shell?
What, the glider kit itself? Let's see, we're doing these back in the 80s. And back then you could buy a glider kit for about $20,000.
Wow.
Wow. Missed those prices.
But then you have to have the engine, and you don't have to rebuild the engine, you put just,
Millionaire overnight,
take it
bro.
out, put it in.
Yeah.
So,
Did you could have had a loan, been able to get a couple of trucks?
But that was back in the 80s.
That's actually what I'm gonna do.
Back in the 80s.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do. Except I'm gonna, when my Maxxforce goes kaput, which hopefully it won't anytime soon, I'm gonna get a remanufactured engine pre-2010 and install it into my current cab.
So you don't have to deal with all that
Yeah,
extra.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
And because,
That's the cheaper way to go about it.
yeah, so next,
I don't know if you can with that.
oh, really?
Yeah, only because it was originally, what year's your truck?
2012.
Okay, because now you're derating the truck, because it wasn't sold as a glider. And the way you can tell it's a glider is typically the serial number. Now, with Kenworth, their gliders used to be a 17-digit serial number. But at the very end, a GL, which stands for glider.
Okay.
And that, because you can't take, even like a new car, you can't take 2018 and drop a 1964 Shelby 429 engine in it. Because you have to meet or exceed the emission standards.
Okay.
That's the loophole the gliders have.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
That's the glider.
Next, because essentially what the EPA mandated was companies like Fitzgerald, their maximum quota is 300. They could put up 300 gliders a year. Obviously, they lobby to build more. And with the current administration, the previous EPA minister, Scott Pruitt, I guess he was kind of lenient, and he kind of let this loophole stand. However, like Mr. Pontzer said, the courts, they ruled against it and said you have to enforce the 300 gliders per year per shop. And these are just some stats in terms of the emissions, and there's the pros and cons. So we talked about both types of emissions management technology. Originally we had the EGR, and the international, they went with Advanced EGR. We talked about the pros and cons in terms of emissions, nitrogen oxide, and DPM. Very clearly, the SCR wins because with the EGRs, you're going to get lower efficiency, which means higher gas mileage. And the SCR is simpler. Some truck drivers may complain that you're going to have to worry about making sure you have DEF. But nowadays, DEF is very prevalent. You can get them in any truck stop. So, as long as you plan it, you can get your DEF. You don't have to worry so much about the EGR, which, by the way, nowadays, everyone is using SCR. So there we see in terms of the pros and cons. Is there anything else, Mr. Pontzer, that?
No, it's probably the biggest thing is just, like we said earlier, it's just more crap on there to go bad.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's, with the cooled EGR, and you put the SCR and stuff on there, DPF, it's added weight to the truck, so we've had to reduce weight elsewhere. That's why we'll talk about blocks, cylinder blocks next week, that they're lighter than they used to be.